Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Wichita United Church of Christ. Streaming on this day of winter weather, or winter weather accumulation anyway. I already have my first problem here because the volume's up on my computer, so I'm going to turn that off. I can hear myself. All right. My name is Reverend Jacob. It's good to be able to join with you today, even if online. With persistence, we choose to be the church together. There is a bulletin for today on the church website at wichitaucc.org/livestream. It's on the live stream page. If you want to join me in a couple of prayers and follow along with the scripture readings, you can open it or you can download it from that page. So instead of forging ahead and just doing the service that I had written for this Sunday that I had planned, we're shifting, like we did last year on a similar day, to something completely different. So similar to last January, when weather caused a remote service, we will explore an unusual reading and story. Last year, we read about a talking donkey. Today, we'll talk about giants and heroes in mythology. Next week, we will be back on the usual schedule. We all pray and hope. And we will join in snack bagging for 𝗪𝗶𝗰𝗵𝗶. But this week, we'll take a pause and we will read fantastic stories and do something different. As a reminder, you can share your gifts and pledges by mailing a check to the church, or you can make a one-time or recurring gift on the church website by clicking the Give link in the top right corner of the church homepage at wichitaucc.org. And now to get us started, though, let's share something together. In the chat, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, I have both of them up, so I'll try to keep a track of them. Share what your plans are for today. Are you going to read a book, put on some snowshoes or shoes that can go outside and go for a walk? Maybe cook something warm like soup or play a game? I know we played some cards last night. What are you planning to do to take advantage of a day maybe less busy? Or maybe you still have work today. How will today be different? So I'll give you just a little bit of time right now to think and to type. As a reminder, there is a few seconds, up to a 30-second delay in the live stream. I think it's less than that, it looks like, today. So I'll return to these comments after our opening prayer. As we consider how this day might be different, bring us to awareness of what we might notice that we did not before, and join with me in prayer. Wonderful mystery, in our very nature we belong to each other. Tangled up in mutuality for millennia, unfolding our stories of life on this small planet home. Awaken us to the wisdom of deep time, that radical possibility may live boldly through us. And when the powerful tell us our hope for change is futile, remind us of the wild cosmos from which we were birthed, or the stories of mystery that bring life to your people. Transformation, beauty, liberation, ever unfolding new life. This is our prayer, O God. We have a few inputs on what people are going to do today. Play in the snow with the dog and paint the walls. I think that counts as a good activity, outside and inside. Clean the drive and read, work on a small quilt I started, staying warm in our house, puzzles and TV. planning on shoveling snow. Dana said that there is an echo. I wonder if that's persistent. Maybe the overheads. If we can mute those overhead mics, that might help. Oh. Crystal? Okay. All right. If that still persists, let me know, and I'm not sure what we'll do about that, but make soup and bake something. There's another input. All right, if you are following along in the bulletin, if you would join with me as we share in our prayer of transformation. If you, it should also be up on your screen here in just a second. If you would join with me. Holy God, all things came into being through you. You enlighten our lives, yet we are drawn to shadows and veils. We distance ourselves from the conditions of oppression and despair of our neighbors, and we hide from displeasure and disappointment at our limitations and shortfalls. Ignite a hunger and thirst for righteousness, justice, and truth in us. Spark compassion in our hearts. Our first reading today is from Genesis chapter 6. It's a story of giants and heroes. When the number of people started to increase through the fertile land, daughters were born to them. And the divine beings saw how beautiful these women were. And so they married the ones they chose. The Lord said, "My breath will not remain in humans forever because they are flesh. They will live 120 years. In those days, giants lived on the earth, and also afterward, when divine beings and human daughters had sexual relations and gave birth to children. And these were the ancient heroes, famous men. And the Lord saw that humanity had become thoroughly evil on the earth, and that every idea their minds thought up was also completely evil. And the Lord regretted making human beings on the earth. And he was heartbroken. And so the Lord said, I will wipe off of the land the human race that I've created, from human beings to livestock to the crawling things to the birds in the skies, because I regret I ever made them. But as for Noah, the Lord approved of him. Hear what the Spirit whispers among the people in strange tellings. If you're looking at the bulletin, you will notice that there is a second reading that we will come to shortly. This sermon is actually a little bit longer, potentially, than usual because it's broken up into these series of stories and retellings. So because you're sitting at home, if you have something warm to drink, maybe you have some coffee or tea, maybe you're eating your breakfast right now, I don't know. But relax and listen to some stories about giants and mythology. God, may our sharing of stories be a reminder of the story that you are creating in our midst, within our bodies, and within our community. Rise within us to respond and to live as the heroes our world needs us to be. So, sons of God and earthly women have giants for children. It's in the Bible. It's right there. We don't usually think about such stories in our scriptures, partly because Christians and also to some extent, but to a lesser extent, Jewish history has a bent towards thinking of things that are logical, and if things don't make sense, then we say that they're not true and we just forget about it. I would imagine, though, if you've heard of Nephilim before, you might have thought that they were bad or maybe even evil. That they were the actual last straw before the flood came. But the story that we just read has a pause before verse 5. The Lord saw that humanity had become thoroughly evil on the earth, and that every idea their minds thought up was always completely evil. It's pretty clear that the sons of God and Nephilim are not the same thing as humans, that there is a distinction. So it doesn't seem that God is actually that mad at them, at these sons of God and Nephilim. God is upset at humans. We also know that the flood does not destroy all of the Nephilim. That's correct. They show up one more time in the Bible. And if you put in the chat right now where it is in the next 5 seconds, I will buy you a lunch this week on me. I guarantee I'm safe on this bet. Any chat come in there, Crystal? Okay. All right, I'm good. Now, if you want to buy me lunch this week, that's also perfectly fine. So the flood mythology that was said to have killed everyone not on the boat. That's the story. But that story, apparently, or the flood, did not kill all the Nephilim. Or the sons of God returned again after the flood and married human women again. The word Nephilim is connected to a base word that means fallen. But it's not quite that straightforward. Not typically like we might think of fallen in sin or in spiritual matters. We might think of the story in Isaiah or Revelation of falling beings being kicked out of heaven, like when Lucifer wanted to be equal to God. A lesser god, Lucifer, challenges the primary god and loses. This again is mythology storytelling, but for another day, I think. The word Nephilim connects to fallen, and that they are earthly offspring of divine creatures, literally born below the heavens. They have fallen in their birth out of the heavens. There's not a clear moral judgment in the name. It's just describing a layering of the cosmos with God at the top, the singular primary God, sons of God and other angelic heavenly beings, Nephilim perhaps underneath that, and then humans, and specifically human women. Human men are not mentioned in the telling of this mythology. So with that very quick backstory, let's hear some similar stories speaking in a familiar rhythm. You may know the name Medusa from Greek mythology. Medusa was said to have been the most beautiful of earthly women. And she was sexually assaulted by the god Poseidon in Athena's temple, a different god. Poseidon, of course, is a god of the waters. And Athena was furious. But instead of punishing Poseidon, maybe because she could not achieve that punishment between two gods, she punishes Medusa by turning her hair into snakes so that she would be terrifying to look at. Also, other humans who looked at Medusa would be turned into stone. So to protect other humans, once she realized what was happening, Medusa went to live with a group of Gorgon sisters, which is another story altogether, who were not harmed for reasons that I am not aware of. Were not harmed by looking at her, maybe because they were in caves and they could not see her. I don't really know. Maybe they just weren't harmed in general. I think it's more likely the second, that her terrifying appearance did not impact them. And so she became a Gorgon in a way. And actually in some tellings of Greek mythology, she becomes a Gorgon or is a Gorgon already. So I do want to mention briefly the connection of the snake in Genesis with Eve and the fruit of the tree of life, and Greek mythology of Athena using snakes quite frequently as a symbol of women's wisdom, protection, and earth power, and how women's wisdom was a continuous and persistent threat to patriarchal control in almost every telling of Western mythology. And so this might connect Eve and Athena and Medusa together in telling similar kinds of stories, and not stories of evil as we have been told, but today we are focusing on sons of God, earthly women, and Nephilim. Medusa, however, and tragically, is killed by Perseus. Perseus is the son of a god and a human mother, a Nephilim in Greek mythology, even though they didn't use that word for them. Perseus used his shield as sort of this mirror in order to look at Medusa as a reflection, because you could look at her indirectly and not be impacted. And he used this shield to look at her and cut her head off. You might think that he was going to destroy her so she couldn't harm anyone, and you would be most wrong about that. Perseus was sent on this quest to cut Medusa's head off by King Polydectes, who was trying to get with his mother, Danae. Danae? I think it's Danae. Athena, who had cursed Medusa, and Hermes, and also Hades, went with Perseus on this task because Perseus was not powerful enough to kill her on his own. And in the end, Medusa's head was kept by Perseus and used to turn countless people into stone. I forgot to mention that when people looked at Medusa, they were turned to stone. Perseus used her severed head to turn people into stone infinitely more than she ever turned people into stone when they looked at her when she was alive. Perseus is an awful character. The thing is, Medusa did nothing wrong. Medusa was assaulted by a god and then was killed by a hero sent on a fool's mission by a would-be father-in-law who wanted him out of the way while he went after his mother. It's pretty gross, actually. For centuries and thousands of years, Medusa has been cast as this evil character, sometimes like Eve is, but she was assaulted and her head was severed and used by Perseus to turn people into stone when he himself was mad because he was throwing a fit or he was too weak to win. She did the only loving thing by leaving the gaze of men to save them from themselves when they kept staring at her because she was beautiful before and now terrifying after. Yet it was not enough to save her. There are no modern parallels to this story, I can assure you. As we say when women are found in similar positions now, it must have been her fault that people kept staring at her. That was sarcasm if I did not communicate that clearly enough. These ancient stories are not foreign to us, I think. It's actually quite possible that the stories of Nephilim in Genesis 6 were written after much of Greek mythology I've mentioned. If they weren't written afterwards, they may have been written about the same time or taking cues from previous Mesopotamian and Egyptian mythology, which there are many similarities. There are, though, clues about the later timing of Nephilim. In the writing of Genesis 6, the use of the word Lord that shows up is Elohim, instead of maybe the one we're more familiar with, which is Yahweh, for the name of God. These are two different ways that, in Genesis specifically, talks about God. And the clue is the use of Elohim is an indication that it might and likely comes from a later addition to the final version. See, because Genesis was written over a period of time, or at least the stories within Genesis were written over a period of time, starting maybe around 1400 BC to around 400 BC, when it was finalized. At least that's the version that we have access to. The older writings often, mostly, use the tribal name for God, Yahweh. And the later writings use the temple period name for God, Elohim. Genesis 6 uses the later name, Elohim. And so as I mentioned earlier, Nephilim do show up one other place in the biblical story. And maybe you Googled it already. They are still around during the Exodus, and they are talked about in Numbers 13. I'll read it real quick. When Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he said, "Go up through the Negev and on to the hill country. See what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees in it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land." It was the season for the first ripe grapes. And they came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. And there they reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. "We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan." Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are." And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they explored. They said, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." There is another book in our biblical canon that also feels similar to Medusa's story and alludes to these same Nephilim-type figures. It's the book of Judith, and it's a deuterocanonical biblical text. It's one of the collection of books that's not in many Protestant canons. It does show up, though, in many translations include these deuterocanonical texts, and also many Catholic Bibles also include Judith as well. It is a legitimate text. It's one that Hebrew Scriptures also include. But it's rarely, or I guess it's not, it hasn't been, anyway, I'll move on. The story follows the triumph of Judith. And Judith is a Jewish widow from Bethulia. And it follows her in her story of an assassination of the Assyrian general Holofernes. Sounds like a mythology name right out of the gate. Bethulia was under siege following the invasion of the Assyrian army. Judith set out to enact divine justice by killing their general Holofernes and ultimately dismantling the Assyrian forces and stopping the attack and the siege. And so what happens is that Judith actually goes up to the camp and she fake surrenders that surely he's going to win because he's so powerful. And she adorns herself with finery, and she puts on makeup and it smells nice, and she seduces Holofernes. And so along with her handmaiden, Abra, the two women approached this enemy encampment, and with this act of deference, they were granted entry. And Holofernes noticed Judith and invited her to a banquet in his private quarters soon after her arrival. he noticed her beauty and thought that he could take advantage of it. And so Holofernes drank himself into a stupor on the night of the banquet while celebrating his upcoming victory. It sounds like a god of mythology for sure. Judith, who he had hoped to celebrate his sure victory with, used this opportunity to finish her task. And so with his sword, in his drunken stupor, she beheads Holofernes with 2 fatal blows. And Judith and Abra then returned to Bethulia with the severed head of the general in a sack, effectively ending the conflict. So here is a reading from Judith chapter 16, which will have a couple familiar spots. And Judith said, "Begin a song to my God with tambourines. Sing to my Lord with cymbals. Rise to him a new psalm. Exalt him and call upon his name. For the Lord is a God who crushes wars. He sets up his camp among his people. He delivered me from the hands of my pursuers. The Assyrian came down from the mountains of the north. He came with myriads of his warriors. Their numbers blocked up the wadis, the valleys where rivers flow, and their cavalry covered the hills. And he boasted that he would burn up my territory and kill my young men with the sword and dash my infants to the ground and seize my children as plunder and take my virgins as spoil. But the Lord Almighty has foiled them by the hand of a woman." And here is the verse that might sound a little familiar. "For their mighty one did not fall by the hands of the young men, nor did the sons of Titans, heroes, strike him down, nor did tall giants, Nephilim, set upon him, but Judith, daughter of Merari, with her beauty of her countenance undid him. For she put away her widow's clothing to exalt the oppressed in Israel. She anointed her face with perfume. She fastened her hair with a tiara and put on the linen gown to beguile him. Her sandals ravished his eyes. Her beauty captivated his soul. And the sword severed his neck." The Persians trembled at her boldness. The Medes were daunted by her daring. Then my oppressed people shouted, my weak people cried out, and the enemy trembled. They lifted up their voices, and the enemy were turned back. Sons of female slaves pierced them through and wounded them like the children of fugitives. They perished before the army of my Lord. These stories are familiar in theme. However, there is another connection between Medusa and Judith, actually. The story gets all sorts of tangled. There's a statue of Perseus holding Medusa's head in the Palazzo Vecchio in Florence, Italy. And it displays him in a hero's triumph. He's holding her head. You can see it. It's in the courtyard outside. You can Google it, I should say. You could fly there, I guess, but that seems a little bit much work. Just like a Nephilim, Perseus was a hero born of a god and an earthly mother. And he uses this powerful woman's severed head, cursed for being attacked, as a weapon to overcome what he is too weak to confront on his own. And Medusa, in many tellings of Greek mythology, if you actually read below the attempts to besmirch her character and say that she is evil, Medusa is a representation of feminine power and the fear it creates in patriarchal systems. And this sort of layering of male gods in mythology. And she finds this safe home among other sisters when she is cursed. And among these sisters, she also keeps others safe from the curse that was put on her. But she is still killed, and her power, as I mentioned earlier, abused by Perseus. And there is a statue of him in celebration with her head. However, in that same plaza, Palazzo Vecchio in Florence, there is another statue created by the famous Renaissance artist Donatello. He was named after a pizza-eating sewer turtle who was good with a staff, I'm pretty sure. The original statue is in a museum alongside the plaza, but there is a bronze replica in the plaza where the original sat. Art by Donatello is apparently too valuable to be outside, so they made a replica and put it where it used to be. This statue, you might guess, is of Judith, just about to cut off the head of the Assyrian general ◨🨊🨶🨊. These two statues, they stand in the same open space within eyesight of each other. Judith, a widow no longer connected or owned by a man, sets out to do the work. Judith, who is beautiful, now does to the Assyrian god king, who would have called himself the offspring of the gods for certain. He would have referred to himself as a hero or a titan or a Nephilim or whatever word he would have used. She does to him what this other hero, Perseus, does to another beautiful woman who had also left the realm of patriarchal control. They are in the same Palazzo Vecchio, which tells me that the connection of these two stories has been noticed before, centuries ago. But for most of us, if we saw them both in a courtyard or plaza, we might not understand what Donatello was attempting to say by placing this statue of Judith in the same courtyard as Perseus. What is the counter story he is telling by his original placement of the Judith statue? And so in both stories, it's clear that the women are the more powerful characters and also far more compassionate about the safety of their community. The two men are overly confident and relish the death of others. And this story that seems so odd in Genesis that we pass over without looking back, and to be honest, for the most part, Protestants think that it is some magical story that is not worth telling or reading about because it connects to other mythology, which is blasphemy, which is boring, honestly. The story that seems so odd in Genesis that we pass over it without looking back, that of giants and heroes of Nephilim, is in reality a deep and long connection to the very real human need to tell stories about how divine actions impact us, especially before we were born or especially before we understood what it meant to be human. It's also a reminder that the stories of powerful women's wisdom are almost always, are often retold in ways that declare them as the evil ones. Eve is our first example in Genesis. And in the case of Judith, her story is rejected from most canons of Scripture because of her leadership, her cunning intelligence, and her physical power that does not fit conveniently with other heroes and patriarchs. But yet these stories remain, even of the Nephilim. They remain in there. Sometimes only these small tidbits make it to us, mostly unnoticed. But we are not finished with such stories of God and humans. The story of Jesus is such a story in a long tradition, if we are curious enough to look. I may be stepping out on a limb for some of us, but I find this connection quite compelling. When we proclaim Jesus as God in flesh or God with us, we are participating in a long line of stories of heroes and giants, of gods having children with human women, I mean, it's kind of right there, of two expressions of the divine, the heavens and earth, birthing a hero that this time will be born to set humanity free. Not one of those heroes of old like Perseus, who is just a jerk. Jesus is not just some mythical God that toys around with humans. This story is different. This time, God is doing something different. Jesus is the breaking of the disconnect between God and humanity that was interfered with by all of these layers. A disconnect. He was the breaking of this disconnect between God and creation itself. We get this storytelling that Jesus is this flattening of the layers of hierarchy between God. This shows up all throughout the epistles, that Jesus was up high and came low and made all things approachable. Flattening of the hierarchy between the old ways in which things were layered, gods and sons of gods and heroes and Nephilim and patriarchs and giants and humanity on the bottom. Earthly humanity on the bottom, often connected to earthly feminine wisdom. But the arrival of Jesus is telling a story that it's actually bridging the connection between what we might consider to be at the top of this hierarchy and at the bottom of this hierarchy, and smashing them together, and that is the new expression of who God is. In Jesus, we see the layers flatten into one divine humanity. He comes from the line of David, after all, who overcame Goliath, a giant, a Nephilim perhaps. The strands of these stories intertwine from so many angles. I could go on for quite a bit longer, but I will not. Like the statue of Judith standing with the sword over 𝗨𝗪𝗶𝗁, staring at Perseus in the same courtyard, as though to say that your abuse of feminine earth wisdom does not scare me. I stare at Medusa, Judith says, and do not fear her. I am her, and you will not overcome me. Jesus stares at the same divide, the divide of divine punishment and human dignity, that we have to debase ourselves in order for God to love us in some way, that God just doesn't automatically. That Jesus is saying that divide is over. He stares at the same divide of life and death itself and says that these two things are not different. That we are beloved in life and we are beloved in death. And in life we experience death, and in death we will experience life. These are one thing. And Jesus stares into the face and says, I do not fear you, death. And then lives on in us, rises forevermore. We are the telling of these stories now. When people like Perseus or powerful people in Jesus' story like Herod threaten more of the same that he did to Medusa, when they say, if you do not comply, then you shall die, we stand with Judas, who stands not afraid. We are the rising of Christ that our world needs now. And may we be born to crush the layers of hierarchy and schemes to keep people below and to silence dissent. May it be so. Amen. I do have a couple of an announcement for this week and the upcoming Sunday. If you do have any announcements, this would be a perfect time to type them in the chat. I will mention that this Tuesday evening, we'll have a prayer group on Zoom. You'll see the link in any of the communicators. It's the gathering room Zoom link. It's the same link that you used for Sunday school, and it's the same link that will be used for a fellowship time after this service. That's Tuesday at 7 o'clock. And as I mentioned, next Sunday we will be back in here, and we will be bagging snack bags, and we'll actually be doing the service that I had planned for today. I'll wait just a second, see if there are any other announcements. Yeah, there is definitely a statue of David in Florence as well, for sure. Thank you for the concern about me being sick. My nose is just, I don't know. I don't feel sick, but my nose just runs. Oh yeah, and next week. Thanks, Mike. Mike was planning to do fellowship this Sunday, but that was postponed till next Sunday, so I think Mike is doing fellowship time. Thanks, Anna, for the Super Bowl chili and soup cook-off. It's February 7th, and we are collecting non-perishable goods and items for that. There will definitely be an item in the communicator again this week talking about that. Reagan has an announcement for Sunday school. If you didn't make it today, they sort of recapped the two. I was not able to go to that today because I was getting ready here. But I could see that quite a few people pre-watched the videos. That's great. So we'll be in person this next Sunday at 8:45. And we're talking about decolonization and what does the church look like. What could the church look like now? And they are pretty inspiring. They're pretty fantastic videos. Okay, I don't think I missed anything here. Ooh, hey, I just saw back in an announcement, Tom mentioned that they'll be taking another pass down the driveway with the new snowblower. New toys are pretty fun. And then to Valley Center to clear Susan's driveway. Good. A day of rest and healing. Routing coaxial cables in the attic. All right, James, go for it, man. Monopoly and dominoes, someone mentioned. Heather mentioned they played Monopoly and dominoes. Nice. Okay, let me check over on the YouTube real quick. All right. If there are no other announcements, I invite you to share with me as we begin preparation for our prayers together. If you have prayers, this would be a good time to start typing them in. As I mentioned, there's a little bit of delay, so I'll be looking in here in just a minute. But for our prayers today, since we are communicating in a public chat, I invite you to spend a few moments and write down, as an option, write down our prayers. There'll be 3 different prayers on a piece of paper, and also speak them out loud. You can talk to yourself in your own house. No one cares. Next week, in person at church, if you bring those prayers and pieces of paper with you, we'll actually put them in a basket when we walk into the church, and then we'll be inviting one another to take one prayer as we leave. So thinking about, as you write a prayer down, keeping information short and enough information for someone to pray for that concern next week. That's one option that you might do this week as we consider the 3 prayer categories coming up. All right. You can also enter your prayers into the chat today, but I encourage you and remind you to please only type the name of the person or the situation. Remember to not share personal information about people in the live stream chat. And now, if you would, if we gather our hearts and our lives in the connected web of Christ binding us together, where you are sitting, or maybe you're lying down, or maybe you're pacing around the room, write the name of a person or persons who you wish to hold in prayer, and speak their name aloud. Someone in your life, or that you are connected to, or that you even just know who they are, that you feel the need to hold them in prayer. Write it down on your piece of paper, type their name in the chat, or speak it out loud. And now I invite you to write down a place or a situation or a community of concern that you want to hold in prayer. And the same thing, write it down on the piece of paper, type it in the chat, or speak it aloud. Or all three. And now write down something in your own life that you need others to hold in prayer with you. Write it down on a piece of paper, type it in the chat, or speak it aloud, or all three. And now we take these prayers, and I'll look here in a second of new comments. We take these prayers written and we keep them for the week. If you did write them on a piece of paper, until next Sunday, where we will share them with each other. On days like this, where we are separated by weather and all sorts of other things that might separate us at other times, on those days, maybe more than most, we are reminded of our commitment to connection with one another. Join with me as we gather in our homes. May we welcome the day as it quiets our movements and forces us to be more still. And may the presence of God be found among us. God of light and of word, nurser of darkness and truth, come to us where we are now, so we can hear well enough to see your songs all around us. And through moments of grace and of truth-telling, you teach us, so we come to know how graciousness lives as a gift that we offer to others. And in promise and in hope, you call us, trusting that we will accept the joy delivered to us and count on the fullness of your dreams for us and for all of creation, and the fantastical stories and in the deep tellings. All this we pray, God in community, holy and one, as we speak the words of the Lord's Prayer together. If you don't have them in front of you, speak in whatever words are familiar to you. Our God, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us now this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. I do want to go back now that we've had a little bit of time and read through some of the prayers that you all have entered. The delay in streaming does cause a pacing. We have Anna has a surgery this week, or a week from Friday. Thanks, Anna. I'm like correcting myself as the chat's correcting itself in real time. On the 6th, continued healing for Elaine, and for 𝗪𝗵𝗶𝗁𝗃 𝗪𝗶𝗁𝗃, I think is the and a line of Renee Good and of Keith Porter in Los Angeles and of 𝗪𝗵𝗶𝗁𝗃, who have been murdered by ICE and immigration agents. For Dana, for a neighbor with a possible reoccurrence of breast cancer after 8 years, who has a young teenager. And for Rex Morley. For the clergy who were able to make a trip to Minneapolis in our own conference, and who made it back safely, and that their experience would be life-changing and is setting a new direction for their pastoral leadership in the church. And for all those who are bearing witness to a brave story of community and watching out for one another in Minneapolis, in very cold weather, we pray. For people who are pretend heroes with masks, are definitely more like Perseus than they are any hero that we care to follow for sure. Only actually probably less capable than Perseus, if we're honest. But a reminder of the violence that we are witnessing and potentially will experience in our own places. This is not new. This is from the founding of our nation. This has been the norm for entire groups of people, for indigenous people, for Black Americans who were brought here, for those displaced and those dehumanized. It's the same playbook, reimagined for a new day. God, hear the prayers of our hearts, those prayers which rest within our body that are almost too painful to speak, physically painful to speak. The prayers of our world and those who we call beloved, for prayers for ourself. That we would hear the words of others holding our name in prayer, gathering the words to speak with you of a peaceable and good life that we want, of a way to live among your people and with you that is life-giving and expressive of the life of Jesus who goes before us. And for those who are without a home, without a place to stay indoors, on a day when a lot of public buildings are closed and places to keep warm are not open. Thanks, Mike, for mentioning those who are exposed outside today and this weekend. So if you would join me as we share a benediction for one another. And as a reminder that we will join in the fellowship Zoom room, and I'll be over there in just a second to start it, so it takes me just a minute to get it started, and then it'll be open and you can come and join. If a lot of people show up, we can break into some breakout rooms, but we'll be as one group unless needed. So hear this and receive this benediction as you go, or as you remain home, or as you rest. Remember that you are called to speak blessing, charged to keep watch for the vulnerable and marginalized, embodying compassion for those humbled and in despair. May a new life of love be born as we share the warmth of God's love and peace in the world. Amen. It's good to see you all in the chat. I will see you in the fellowship room.